Hello, Podsmashers of the Internet. Welcome to another episode of 80-Bit Podsmash, where gaming goes to grab a beer. Tink. We are your hosts, Penguin and Termite. I am Termite.
I am Penguin.
And we are a weekly video game podcast smashing together ideas that you care about with video games. And tonight we have a very special episode.
Yeah, it's a bonus.
It's a bonus episode, unedited, exclusively about the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X technical specs and then future console war that's coming up.
Yep. So we got a bunch of information this week on both, 2 weeks ago on the Xbox and last week on the PlayStation. And they finally information dumped on us. So we don't have all the stuff, but we have a lot more technical detail than we did before. So we'll be breaking all that down. And part of the reason we're doing this is because we don't have E3 this year, thanks to the coronavirus. And so we're doing this as like a bonus episode to make up for the bonus episode we normally do.
So instead of a 3-hour E3 pre-hype episode, you're going to get about an hour tonight dissecting the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X tech specs.
Yep. And speaking of coronavirus and quarantine and things being canceled, Termite and I are using this opportunity to experiment with some remote recording software. So we are both in the comfort of our own homes, away from each other, over the internet, recording simultaneously, synced up. So,
supposedly synced up. We'll let you guys be the judge of that.
Yeah, so if there's any technical hiccups, we apologize. Also, as a bonus episode, this is completely unedited. So you'll get the raw, all the ums, and all that. So if you want a more polished episode, look for any episode of ours that has a number and doesn't have the word bonus on.
And that's a great segue to tell you guys where we are. If you do want to find more episodes of our podcast, you can go to 80bitpodsmash.com. That's our landing website where we have links to Google Play, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Stitcher. We also have social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Twitch and Discord. I think those are our main social media. Yeah, you just like freak out and your brain just goes away completely when you're trying to describe where we are. There's a Discord link in every single one of our Facebook posts for every episode that launches on Monday, as well as in the show notes. So there's no excuse for you guys not to get to Discord. There's plenty of links everywhere. Hit us up. Tell us what you think. Give us feedback. And if we are not on a platform you want us to be, let us know. And we'll put ourselves there. Every Wednesday night, we are on twitch.tv/80bitpodsmash, where we will greet you guys live in front of a video game that we're feeling. We're trying to mix it up and not do the same kind of games over and over again. So far, we're 100%. Every week has been a different game. This
wrong.
whole spiel.
I did Borderlands twice.
You're stupid. So yeah, you can expect our twitch.tv live streams. All of those videos go live on YouTube for on-demand consumption, but it's more fun when you're in the chat. You can respond to us there. So that's where we are.
Huzzah! We are also where gaming goes to grab a beer. So even though we are in the comfort of our own homes, we both are sharing a drink remotely. Social distancing while still social drinking.
Indeed.
So what are you drinking?
So I have a little bit of a story, not too much craziness, but with the social distancing, all of the restaurants and bars have kind of shut down except for the big box stores. And there's a cry from all of the local breweries and restaurants, local businesses that don't have the support of a chain behind them. And so workers are getting their hours cut and people are struggling to get along. Get by. And so we have this drive to want to support these restaurants and breweries that we know and love here in our area. So on Facebook, they post different new kind of innovative ways they can reach out to customers, and we can get their food either by delivery or curbside service, or because their restaurants are closed. So Spencer Devon is a local brewery here. I'm drinking one of their beers. They posted that you can get a dealer's special, which is 4 pint cans for $8. So you're getting craft beer at $2 a pint. And they said, order as many as you want, pull up into our alley, give us a phone call, and we'll come out and we'll ring you up and deliver your beer. You don't have to get out of your car. You can stay social distanced away. And so I did that. And it's a mixed bag. So I got 8 different pints And tonight I am drinking Spencer Devon's Royston Rye IPA. And it is a rye IPA. So if you like hops
Rye
and
PA.
this is, right up your alley. It's about 6.5% ABV and a 77 IBU. I read that off the can, but they don't have a description of the beer because it's like a local brewery, so they don't have the professional stickers with the verbiage on it. That's what I'm drinking tonight. It's awesome.
Sweet.
It hits.
I just haven't really had an alcohol refresh in my house for a while other than like specific events. So I pulled out whatever dregs I had left in my liquor closet. So I had some just enough for a mixed drink of New Amsterdam gin. And
Ooh.
so I polished that off with a seltzer water, a grapefruit seltzer water. So I'm having a grapefruit gin and tonic-ish kind of thing.
Have you ever thought about just drinking gin straight with essential oil drops in it?
No. It's too
I
late
wonder if
now.
that'd be any good.
Gone.
Yeah, it's for tonight. But I just had that thought because we
That'd
had
be good.
Corona,
I like neat.
which that episode will go live on Monday.
Yeah. So you'll hear us. That was the last episode we recorded in person, where we just do a whole breakdown of the coronavirus and its effects on the gaming industry. So you have that to look forward to. We actually bumped another episode back to record that one, and then we're doing this one. So lots of content to enjoy. That's all recent events and topical. So
we may have more time on our hands because of social distancing and quarantining and working from home, and so we can record more content for you guys. But now you guys have more time to consume us.
Consume us.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to skip our usual segments other than this little update about what we're doing. We're not going to do any other news. We're not going to do favorite things, and we're not going to do DLC. We're just going to jump right into it because it's a bonus episode. So this is bonus content. So you shouldn't have such high expectations of us. So we're going to go ahead and talk about the PlayStation versus the Xbox, the details we have so far, story so far, if you will.
So right now, what is your overall feel across both? Like, are you more excited or less excited about either console now that all the details have been out? Before we get into the weeds, let's like high level.
Both consoles are focusing on something that I care greatly about that has been the biggest weakness, I would argue, of the last generation, and that is that load speed. So both consoles having a solid state drive that we've known since, the Wired article about the PS5. I think there are a lot of things I like about what the Xbox is doing. I think Microsoft is making a lot of good choices, but they haven't necessarily swayed me because it's all about them games, it's all about the exclusives. And I know at the end of the day, I can play everything the Series X has to offer on my computer. Maybe not. I might have to upgrade my computer at some point, but in the short term, I should be able to play it all. So
I got you. So previous to all of these tech details launching, when Microsoft announced there will be no exclusive titles to the Series X, and then Sony countered and said, you'll definitely get PlayStation 5 exclusives. You're kind of in that camp of PlayStation right now. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I see what you mean. But at the same time, I respect Microsoft's approach a lot more because of the flexibility it gives them.
This is the subjective, like total opinion based answer question. Like before we get into things, when we start breaking stuff down objectively, it's like, where are we at? Let's just get a gut check.
Yeah.
I'm a Sony like fanboy almost. I might as well. Like I'm a Nintendo fanboy at heart. That's really where my heart is, and so I'm always going to vote for Nintendo over everyone else. That's my bias. I'm not shy about that from episode 0, to now. But in the meantime, right now, I'm in the Sony ecosystem. I have trophies. I love trophies. I'm hitting all of the PlayStation Sony exclusives, like you just mentioned. And as of right now, I'm not dissuaded to buy a PS5 for an Xbox Series X. But I do think the Series X has something magical happening where they could draw the quote, we have the most powerful gaming console out there now. And that could,
spoilers.
Could. But, that's where I'm at. It's high level talk. So
sure,
we're going to get into the weeds. We're going to digest and break all this out. But that's where I'm at.
Another gut check, if you don't mind me bringing it out, is the way both consoles both companies have been doling out the information. As I've mentioned before, in both cases, it's been weird. But if I had to put a crown on anybody's head as to who's the better communicator at this point, it's Microsoft by a long shot. They've
And that's
shown the
very
console.
indicative of what we're going to talk about later too. But
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, sure. No, I just wanted to, again, high level, I feel like Sony's been miscommunicating a lot, not just with lack of communication, but the communication they have been giving, they've had to re-clarify things, which we'll get into more detail about that. But I'm disappointed in the way Sony's been handling things. And sure, they've been throwing some curveballs, but yeah, it's
been a weird release of an information revelation, if you will, from Sony with the whole Wired articles and like this weird GDC talk that was pre-recorded and kind of released because of coronavirus. But yeah, it's totally different than what they've done before. And Microsoft is still doing the mainstream appeal like, yeah, we got you. Here's our cool stuff. And yeah, we'll get into that later. But there's definitely a reason why you appreciate Xbox's messaging more than these. And we'll talk about why later.
All right, cool. Then shall we get into it? The first question we wanted to ask is we wanted to just do a technical contrast. How do the consoles differ from a hardware perspective, and what will they be able to accomplish with those specifications?
Yeah, so if you were interested at all, I ate this up. I loved Mark Cerny's hour-long discussion in the weeds of all of the details of the hardware. He went into teraflops and RDNA, GDDR5, gigabytes per second compression, ray tracing, all this crazy stuff. So we'll just break down the tech specs, and however you guys want to understand what it means, we'll try to break it down as much as we can.
Yeah.
There's a lot of technical mumbo jumbo stuff went over my head. I'm a software engineer, and I have a computer science degree, and some of the stuff still went over my head too.
Yeah.
Even as an enthusiast with gaming, so it's very complicated. And Mark Cerny's stuff is he's a freaking genius, dude.
Yeah.
There's no one in the gaming industry as smart as that man.
We'll try to ELI 5 where we can, based on our understanding.
Explain it like I'm 5.
Exactly.
For those of you who don't know what ELF5 is, I didn't know that until you said it.
Yeah.
Okay, PlayStation 5. For the CPU, there's an 8-core Zen 2 processor at 3.5 gigahertz.
Why don't we
variable frequency?
Why don't we
what? What are we doing?
Piece by piece. So CPU versus CPU on both machines. Yep.
Cool. All right. Sweet.
So that was
I said
core.
PlayStations. You say Xbox.
Okay. All right. The Xbox, in contrast, CPU also has 8 cores, but they have 3.8 gigahertz, and then in parentheses 3.6 gigahertz with SMT, and it's a custom.
So that's one of those
Zen CPU.
Yeah. SMT is some sort of like low level techno thing that has to do with like throttling or something. So there's a feature they can add to the computer, the CPU, the processor, SMT, that takes 0.2 gigahertz cycles. So that's why it says 3.6 with that. Mm-hmm. I don't want to get into that. Yeah, so
it's fine.
3.5 gigahertz with SMT on the PlayStation and 3.6 with Xbox Series X. So the winner there is Xbox.
Yeah.
By 0.1 gigahertz.
Yeah. CPU, the processor, basically means how many processes at a time so how many things can the computer do in one instance of time.
Right.
And so, yeah, the Xbox is going to be faster in that regard. In regards
to 0.2 gigahertz.
Yeah. In regards to what they'll be able to do with that,
we shall see.
Like the difference at the level of gigahertz, the difference between 3.5 and 3.8 might not make that much of a difference, but should increase the frame rate and stuff like that.
Right.
Okay.
So CPU processing is usually involved with things like artificial intelligence. Mm-hmm. Obviously I/O, that's input output, all the stuff, the controller input, reading and writing to memory, reading and writing to the hard drive, the interface with the graphics. That's the stuff the CPU is kind of the center at. So the graphics themselves and the frame rates are like secondarily affected by the CPU.
Yeah.
So the GPU, that's the graphics processing unit. That's the thing that matters. That's the gaming stuff. That's where it counts. PlayStation 5 has a 36 compute units, that's CU, at 2.23 gigahertz at a variable frequency, giving you a 10.28 teraflop calculation. So if you take a number of compute units and you multiply it by how many cycles they can do per second, you get the teraflops. So that's 36 CUs, 2.23 gigahertz, and that's a 10.28 teraflop.
Yeah, the graphics cards where all the heavy lifting happens.
Mm-hmm.
Did you say the Xboxes yet?
Mm-mm.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
That's
The
you.
the Xbox is going to compute at 52 units, so CUs, and it should be processing at 1.825 gigahertz with a custom RDNA 2 GPU, and they're boasting a 12 teraflop rate.
Mm-hmm. So if you do the math on Xboxes, the 52 times the 1.825 gigahertz cycles per second, you get the 12 teraflops. This is where everyone on the internet is losing their minds. Like, Xbox is going to win. They're stronger by 1.82, or I can't do math, 1.72 teraflops, which is almost an entire PlayStation 4 worth of graphics processing better. And that's not really the case. Mark Cerny dives into this. He's talking about if you increase the frequency, which PlayStation 5 has a 2.23 gigahertz frequency versus Xbox's 1.825, you'll see that he uses the analogy of a rising tide rises all boats. And that makes sense, because if you increase the frequency, you're increasing the communication across the entire board for all the different types of shaders, for ray tracing, for volumetric lighting calculations, and all these things he gets into. So it's not really a one-to-one. And Digital Foundry, when comparing video cards, like eons ago when The Witcher 3 had come out, they actually had two different video cards, and the one with lower teraflops actually produced a higher frame rate because of this. So don't lose your mind.
Eons ago, back in 2015.
Eons. That's last gen now. So anyway, all right, we can move on.
You got the PS5.
Right, PlayStation 5. Memory. We're going to go to graphics, right? Is that what's next? Yep. 16 gigabytes of GDDR6 RAM. It's 256 interface.
Yep. And then Xbox, in contrast, has a 16 gigabyte GDDR6 with 302 bit bus.
Ooh. So a little bit higher.
Wait, what did I say? I might say 320. 320.
Yeah, you said 320. PlayStation 5 is 256. I do believe that is correct.
So what's the ELI 5 on memory?
Memory is how much room you have to store, to write and read from that is really, really close to you when you want to run a calculation. It does not involve a hard drive at all. It's right there. GDDR6 is a ridiculously fast interface, so it's super fast, right in your face RAM, and it's usually with PCs, people will talk about it allows you to run more applications at the same time. But we're talking about a gaming computer or a gaming machine here, which RAM, it does matter. You have the operating system and you have like the internet stuff and maybe some chat party things happening all at the same time. And everyone's touting how you can like suspend multiple games because there's so much hardware here. That's what RAM affects. And it just allows things like textures that are going to be 4K, so they're huge, allows them to be written to memory and read from memory quickly. And that does affect the frame rate when there's lots of stuff on the screen at one time.
Cool. Next, memory bandwidth.
Memory bandwidth, and this is another point of contention that people are going to lose their minds about. 448 gigabytes per second for PlayStation 5 across the board.
Yep. And memory bandwidth for the Xbox Series X is showing 10 gigabytes at 560 gigabytes per second, or 6 gigabytes at 336 gigabytes per second. So I'm not sure what the disparity is there.
That's assuming... not that's like the 16 gigabytes split. So 10 gigabytes of that is faster than 6 of that, where all of PlayStation's is the same.
Interesting.
And there's a lot of speculation about how that's going to work. I don't know, but I think it's kind of not going to make a big difference.
Like a non-issue. Yeah. Okay. All right. And then next is internal storage.
So internal storage is a custom 825 gigabyte solid state hard drive for PlayStation 5.
And this is where the Xbox has a slight advantage with 1 terabyte of a custom NVMe solid state drive.
This is another interesting point. That's just storage space. That's just like how many games can you install. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent. Mark Cerny talked about how current hard drives, if you dissect a hard drive, it's platters like a record player. And there's a head on it that like is on an arm, and that platter spins and the head reads whatever sector on a platter. Sometimes you have to switch platters, and it ends up amounting to like 2/3 of the amount of time a hard drive is running is spent seeking. And that is just the head navigating its physical point of reading to the correct platter. And so with this solid state drive, you're eliminating all that. It's just like RAM. It's ridiculously fast. And so that's the internal storage. He talked about the 825 gigabytes. They came up with that number because they analyzed the majority of players on the internet and what they were installing and how much space they were consuming on the current gen, which is a terabyte standard. Like your PlayStation 4, no, it's not Taco Bell. I wish it was. It's the gold, right? It's terabyte, right?
Yeah.
So you have a terabyte hard drive. I have a terabyte hard drive in my PS4 Pro. So everyone, it's pretty much ubiquitous that every console has a terabyte. So they analyzed like how much they're actually using, and they landed at 825 for cost efficiency because they could go up higher, but the higher you go, it's an exponentially more expensive chart. So we don't know the price of the consoles yet, but this was a cost saving choice for sure.
Well, and as you pointed out to me when we were discussing it, I was worried that games were going to bloat in size, as we've seen with a lot of the PlayStation 4 games. Red Dead Redemption 2 is an astronomically high install when it comes to hard drive space. And you mentioned that because of the solid state drive versus the disk hard drive, they'll be able to actually reduce the size of each game because of the way it pulls stuff. So,
right. Going back to what I was talking about with that 2/3 kind of padding on your search time, developers try to circumvent the speed at which you can load objects into your game by copying the file to different physical locations on different physical platters so that the head would spend less time seeking. And so the example set forth was in Spider-Man. Apparently the mailbox, which is a texture and like some geometry, it's kind of small, but there's 400 copies of the mailbox on the hard drive in the file. That's like bloated. That there's no need for that. So and with this new solid state, that won't happen. So that there won't be 400 copies of a 1 megabyte file, which is half a gig.
Yeah. So the already bad load times are made less bad than they would normally be because the file size is bigger. So Red Dead Redemption 2 has to be that big in order so that you don't spend a day waiting for the screen to load.
Right, exactly.
But that will all be eliminated with a solid state drive. So in an ideal world, we'll actually see games begin to shrink in size. Therefore, that 825 gigabytes will go a lot further. You'll be able to install more games. That said, theoretically, the same is true for the Xbox. And therefore, at the end of the day, with a terabyte versus 825, you'll still be able to put more on your Xbox than you will the PS5.
Right.
But it's going to be also probably more expensive, so we'll see how that cost is balanced.
We don't know the cost yet.
Yep, exactly. Yep. All right, next, I/O.
5.5 gigabytes per second raw. And I/O throughput means how fast or how much data can you load from the hard drive into memory. And that's 5.5 gigabytes per second. That is ridiculous.
Yeah, I/O
and if you
stands
compress
for
it,
input output.
Yes, I/O is input output. Typically, all of this stuff is compressed. So with it being compressed, you can get, and what compression is like shrinking the file. So on the hard drive, it exists at a size, and then they compress it. And then the I/O happens, you read, and you have to decompress it. So there's an extra processing like thing that happens afterward, but you can get more data through by having it compressed. So PlayStation is touting an 8 to 9 gigabytes per second. With compression, like how much data they can get through. 9 gigabytes per second. That is crazy. Like you could load all of Red Dead Redemption 2, the entire world, all of its textures, animations, all the models, all the animals, the field, the water, the effects, the weather, all of it in the time it takes you to turn around.
Yeah.
Just like, boom. No loading, no skipping, no pop in, nothing.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
So this is where the PlayStation finally gets to numerically shine versus the Series X. Their I/O, their disk I/O is 2.4. The Xbox is 2.4 raw and 4.8 compressed. So about half in both cases. So I can speak from experience I work as essentially a backup engineer now at my company, and I'm seeing firsthand how important I/O is, because we just added a bunch of network cables. We added 40 gigabytes worth of network cables to a device right now in order to speed up our backup processing. And now what we're seeing is the throttling isn't happen at the network level anymore. It's happening at the disk I/O level. So our backups are now being processed more slowly, not because of a network restriction, not because of data going through a cable, but because the disks themselves can only process so much data at a time. So I/O throughput is super important when it comes to loading files, and the PS5 has that advantage significantly at this point.
Yeah. And those speeds are almost like modern RAM speeds. Like they're insane. So
yeah, and it's literally pulling data from the hard drive. So whereas in video game console, in a computer, RAM is king, because you're usually running multiple applications at a time. And even if you are just using it for gaming, you've still got antivirus software running in the background. You maybe have Dropbox. You have all this stuff that's eating RAM. So RAM is super important in order to get your games running fast. I/O is important too, but like Termite was highlighting, you're not going to have multiple applications running at the same time as much.
This is a dedicated gaming device.
Yeah. So in this case, I/O is going to be super important when it comes to a solid state drive. The PS5 will just objectively be able to pull that data and stick it in a RAM faster. Maybe it won't make that much of a difference. Maybe both consoles will still be able to process games in a matter of seconds. But I think it's still impressive, that number.
The current gen PlayStation 4, their I/O throughput is 50 to 100 megabytes per second. And that is a degree of magnitude
just
like
insane.
Smaller. That's nuts. So to compare the two, to like even that out, the 9,000 versus 100. That's we're talking about 9,000 to 100. Right now we're at 100. You get 9,000 with the 5. Crazy.
Yeah, that's
ridiculous. Yeah.
All right, let's move on. We've talked about I/O enough. What's next?
Yeah. Expandable storage. So this is another area where Sony shines. They're going to have an NVMe. That's just the name of the port, the interface, the card shape. It's an NVMe slot, and you're allowed to go out and get something from anywhere you want, Amazon, Best Buy, etc., and buy your own, as long as it's NVMe and it matches a speed requirement, which has not been published yet. You can slap that in there. That's for expandable storage for extra hard drive space. So if 825 gigabytes is not enough, you want to have like a 2 terabyte thing on the side and not ever have to worry about stuff again. Just go shopping to your heart's content, find the best deal, and slap that sucker in there.
Yeah, and just to help clarify, NVMe is it's a universal format of some type. Not universal, but for the sake of expandable storage, it's something you should be able to easily Google, find it, grab it off of Amazon. Think of it like USB for this specific purpose.
Or SD cards.
Yeah.
Like for photographers, they run through SD cards for their cameras.
The Switch,
so
doesn't the Switch use SD as well?
Card. It's a
micro SD.
They use micro SD. Yeah.
Cool. All right, so
what's Microsoft got?
Microsoft's got they have 1 terabyte expansion cards that match their internal storage exactly. So what that means is they're proprietary pieces of equipment, meaning that if you want to expand your storage, you've got to go to Microsoft to get their proprietary drives.
This is like a memory card.
Yeah.
All over again.
Exactly. Except at least you could get like a Mad Catz memory card if you want to save money.
Oh gosh, there's probably going to be some third party thing.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah,
but it'll at least be Microsoft's proprietary slot and format.
This is very Apple to me. Like this is the kind of crap that Apple pulls, where they're like, you have to buy our special crap in order to use it, and it makes me disappointed in Microsoft because they tend with their other devices to be all about the USB stuff.
Yeah. Huh.
Either way, this is definitely a knock in Xbox's disfavor.
It is. Someone online, of course, Reddit is amazing, and people on the internet go crazy. They said if you go out and find a 1 terabyte NVMe solid state drive for expandable storage for a PC, to get the speeds that they've advertised, which caveat are half speeds of Sony. To get this matching speed, it's like a $200 card right now, and that's third party.
Yeah.
So you think about Microsoft's proprietary slot and have to market with branding and all that crap. $200, and that's probably on the cheap end. So this thing could run 2 to 350, for an extra terabyte of space.
That's insane.
That's nuts.
That's the cost of a console right there.
Right.
The cost of a Switch right there. You know what I mean?
It is.
That's nuts.
Buy a whole Nintendo Switch for
insane.
that. It is.
Okay.
But with Sony, you can't even find a hard drive that fast, which is indicative of how awesome their hardware is. It doesn't exist. They're not that fast yet.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Cool. All right. In addition to the solid state drives, both consoles will support other external storage format types. So
yeah, Mark Cerny dove into that a little bit. He said with a regular USB like solid state drive, external hard drive as you can get, you can put your whole PS4 library on that, and it'll read it just like your PS4 does now. You wouldn't even notice a difference. But they're not supported for exclusive PS5 games. They would have to be copied into system memory, and so you could do some shuffling around. But there was a divide. There was a clear distinction between retro and current gen with the external storage.
This supports non-solids. This supports old disk drives too.
Right.
But if you use an old disk drive, you'll have it won't have the faster pulling speeds, right?
Right. And if games aren't made for that, then they're not going to support it. So that's why he made that clarification. It was like, this is for backwards compatibility stuff.
Yep. And Microsoft has the same thing. There's this USB 3.2 though. I
don't know what that means.
Yeah, I know USB 3.0. It's the blue, right? It's the blue ones.
Yeah, it's faster than the previous ones, but I don't know what the 3.2 means.
And will support older USB types. I don't know. We'll see. So. Yep. And then finally, we get to the optical drive.
4K Ultra HD Blu-ray drives across the board, which is fine.
In both cases.
I'm glad they're still doing that.
Yep.
Thank you for putting a disc drive in our consoles.
Yep.
For us physical gamer lovers.
Yep. Cool. So, technical breakdown. Let's sort of compare and contrast overall. What are your impressions, technically, between these two consoles? Given that we just broke down CPU, we worked on processing, memory, graphics, internal storage, external storage, and input-output.
One of the key differences between Xbox and PlayStation with regards to their CPU and GPU, those are the workhorses, those are the things that matter the most. The biggest difference here is Xbox has touted a static frequency, and that means regardless of how hot it runs, regardless of the demands you put on it, it will always run at the 3.8 gigahertz or 3.6 with SMT and the 1.82 gigahertz. Like, those will always be the case. Sony has touted a variable frequency, but in current hardware everywhere, you can buy for your computer or for your whatever, the variable frequency, as in it throttles, it slows down, is based on thermals. So if it gets too hot, it'll slow down and your frame rate would drop. With this, Sony has touted that they're not doing it that way anymore. This is a new way of doing it where they're basing the frequency on the demand. So if the developer is just putting a really hard game in your system like God of War, which sends your PlayStation 4 out to the moon with its fan speeds, it's going to react differently with its frequency than if you played something like Horizon Zero Dawn, which is not as graphically demanding. And so supposedly this regard, like, thermals is heat, and heat comes from power, and power requires cooling. So with the variable frequency versus the solid one, they're both advantageous for different stuff. And we don't know what's going to be the end result there, but that's kind of the biggest key difference. And I kind of like the idea of Xbox being this huge, like, beefy brute force. If you want to go RPG class, you can say warrior. And they're just brute forcing, like, we're going to have more teraflops and it's going to just be solid and nothing will change. But Sony's more agile, more like a rogue, more like I'm going to run in bursts and be very efficient with what I'm doing. So we'll see what happens when games actually come out. But that's kind of the biggest difference. And then, of course, we already talked about how the PlayStation's solid-state drive implementation is very, very fast. It's ridiculously fast.
Yeah.
So
I think my impressions overall, based on this tech breakdown, Microsoft is really focusing hard on graphical fidelity, and I am, from my perspective, I'm of the mindset where it's like, guys, we're reaching a plateau. Graphics can only get so good at this point, and I value speed more because there's nothing more immersion breaking than a 30 to 90-second load screen where I'm just like browsing Reddit or whatever just to pass the time. And I can't speak for the Xbox One because I don't have one, but I know playing PS4 right now, I'm like, okay, I love Horizon Zero Dawn. It's such a great game, but the load screens on it are abysmal. And then don't get me started on games like Anthem, even Borderlands, where the game design itself forces you into load screens way more often than it should, and those load screens are significant enough where I end up pulling up my phone just to pass the time. I should never pull up my phone when playing a game. I should never have a reason to unless I'm looking something up or trying to talk to someone. I should never have to do it just to pass the time. So I, for one, value the emphasis that Sony's putting on speed on this console, where they're higher input output, that variable frequency. I don't think I'm going to notice the difference between 10 and 12 teraflops. Maybe there are people out there with better eyes than me that will, but I can speak for myself and just say I don't care enough about a 1.x difference in teraflops because it's not going to make a difference to my experience. So Xbox can lord that over as much as they want, but if their console is slower at loading things, I'm not going to be interested in it.
And if it means inkling out like 5 to 10 more frames per second, or like maybe it has a better anti-aliasing implementation on Xbox, so if you take a freeze frame and you count pixels and you zoom in 400% and you look at the difference, this is kind of what my complaint was about the PS4 Pro when they were talking about how, it does 4K and checkerboard versus native, and Xbox One X does native 4K, and so the difference between the two, I never noticed it because I don't care. I wanted the frame rate. I wanted the experience of the smoothness of animations happening, and so I never turn on the high graphics settings, at least for me personally, on my PS4 Pro. I just leave it at higher frame rate, or at least a locked frame rate, so the frame rate doesn't change. It doesn't go from 45 to 55. It locks in at 30. It stays there. It never dips into the 20s like it does on the base hardware. And so you get into that kind of like, what do you want out of these consoles? And that's the kind of granularity we're going to have to compare the two, at least based on these tech specs. And it looks like Sony's going to have faster loading times across the board.
Yeah.
And when it comes to first-party games, things like, for example, Infamous 3, maybe you'll get a super speed like Flash superhero that can go ridiculously fast. The stuff that they'll be able to do in that with texture streaming and loading in models is going to be far surpass anything Xbox could ever do because of that's one example of what Sony's doing.
Yeah, and being able to design a seamless world without load screens. Like, can you imagine an MMO where you didn't have to instance dungeons? You just walk through into a dungeon, and sure, maybe there's something in place to limit the number of players in a party, but the experience, the user experience, the gamer experience between walking from one place into the other, that just creates such a level of immersion that we haven't seen possible at this point because of variable hardwares. Even in the PC world, where this hardware has existed for 10 years, game designers have to account for the fact that everybody has different types of hardware. They can't they can say you have to have a solid state drive for this, but they're not going to, because that would limit an entire number of players that they want to buy their game. So no one's been able to design games like this before, but now that the hardware will be, especially because PS5 is taking the risk in drawing that line in the sand, they'll be able to say, hey designers, this is what you have to work with. Go for it. Go ham.
Yeah, and Sony also talked about how they're looking at the gamer's experience, and they emphasized this new 3D audio implementation, and they were talking about this separate chip that they're offloading all the audio processing on, which Xbox does too. They just didn't really talk about it a lot.
Yeah.
They touched on it, but Sony really went, like, there's I don't even know, 20-minute discussion about these things called HRTFs, which is like human reactionary. I don't even know what it is, but every individual has an HRTF, which is like a fingerprint, and it's how you process sound individually with the shape of your ear, etc. And they were talking about how Sony dove into that research and came up with like 4 different kind of like averages, like settings you can use to allow you to have this amazing 3D audio experience. And this stuff that they're going to put on, they say currently audio takes up like 20% of the processing power of any video game, and they've completely offloaded that. Again, Microsoft did too. So with the hardware we're seeing here, we're not including the discussion about the audio chip.
Yeah.
But that kind of went the way of nothing. You know, there was these sound cards you could buy for your PC, but no one ever used them. And so game developers never utilized the power of a sound card ever. So they were always these extra add-ons that people didn't need, and they never bought them. So they don't make them anymore.
Yeah.
But you can get them, but you know, they're for like band, music processing, podcasting, etc. So in gaming, now we have this whole like crazy advanced, you know, from Sony. They're really emphasizing audio, and we know from the Wired article that was written
emphasizing
forever
audio
ago. How about that?
A company that made, you know, audio equipment for years.
Walkman.
Yeah.
I mean, the Walkman at Sony. Yeah, it's interesting that they're continuing that. So they also talked about their controller and how they're going to have like these variable tension triggers and these haptic feedback. And someone was saying, you're playing like Gran Turismo as a racing game, how you could feel the steering wheel and every bump on the road. And if it was raining, you could feel the car like lose traction, etc. It was an entirely different experience just in changing the controller. Like the graphics were Gran Turismo Sport, which is on PS4, so nothing was changed. Or Microsoft is going down the path of, we'll just throw better graphics at it. 4K, better frame rate, and volumetric lighting, anti-aliasing, ray tracing, you know, all those variable shaders, craziness. That's it. That's kind of an iterative approach where Sony's looking to kind of revolutionize what the next generation is going to look like.
Yeah. I wanted to talk as well about the currently announced features. So, the big one, of course, of this generation is, what have the consoles said about backwards compatibility?
Ooh, right. So we know Microsoft we're going back all the way to Xbox.
Yep.
We want everything with an Xbox to be playable on any Xbox machine.
Yeah, they've
ever.
Confirmed that if you have a Halo 1 disc, original Halo Combat Evolved disc for the original Xbox, and you put it in the Xbox Series X, boom, you're playing it.
Yep. Yeah, and it works that way right now with the Xbox One.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I have an original launch Xbox One console, and I can take my original Xbox. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. I just hear Xbox in my ears, like over and over again. But yeah, Forza 1, Halo 2, you know, like these big Xbox One hits, I can just put them in my Xbox One and it works. And they're going to continue that for the new one.
There have been 3 Xbox consoles before the new one. So this is their 4th generation Xbox. Mm-hmm. As a reminder, it was Xbox, Xbox 360, Xbox One, and now Series X with the One Pro
mid-step. Huh?
What was
their Xbox One X is the mid-step. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's the Series X, but there's also the Xbox One S, and there's the Xbox One S discless edition.
But in regards to like generations,
right?
Lines in the sand.
4. This is Gen 4.
This is Gen 4, yeah.
Yep.
So, but the Gen 4 console will be able to play Gens 1 through 3. Yep.
Yep. And there's a limited selection of 1. Gen 1 stuff is like not 100%, but most.
Yeah. In contrast, the PlayStation, Sony has announced that the PlayStation will be the PlayStation 5, will be backwards compatible with the PlayStation 4. No word yet on 1 through 3, but it's a start. So they have at least confirmed that your existing PlayStation 4 library will be playable on the 5. There was some confusion about that based on what Mark Cerny said, but he clarified and explained that the over 4,000 titles on the PlayStation 4 will and probably will run fine on the 5. They're in the middle of testing. They've tested the top 100 titles, and they all run great.
Mm-hmm. And the top 100 was the source of the confusion because he was talking about in his, if you listen to his video and you put his comments in context, he was in the middle of talking about backwards compatibility with the increased clock rate and the boost, quote unquote, boost mode. And so the top 100 most played PS4 titles ever have been tested at the higher frequencies that the PlayStation 5 allows for almost kind of a free extra. You don't have to go in and change the code enhancement, whether it's frame rate or if it's resolution, upscaling, etc. It's like this game just runs on the hardware at a better something,
Yeah.
and it works. It doesn't crash or doesn't like bug out. Because if you increase the clock rate and developers have implemented some specific solution to like tie some animation to the clock rate, and you increase clock rate, the animation's broken. And that was kind of the issue with Kingdom Hearts. And that was a whole debacle, and they lost the code, and it was crazy trying to port Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 over to the newer hardware, etc. So that was a point of confusion because everyone took that and ran and said, oh, only 100 PlayStation 4 titles are backwards compatible? No, only 100 PlayStation 4 titles are okay with boost mode.
Yeah, and that though I 100% agree with you that if you listen to his comments in context, that is what he said. However, he had a really weird way of saying it, so I can see how people misunderstood. So I do still blame that on Sony.
Yeah, it was definitely not communicated clearly. And there was an update. I can read the quote. It's really small. They say, quote, a quick update on backwards compatibility with all the amazing games in PS4's catalog. We devoted significant efforts to enable our fans to play their favorites on PS5. Sony writes in an updated text, which posted at the top of its tech specs announcement from 2 days ago, quote, we believe that the overwhelming majority of the 4,000 PS4 titles will be playable on PS5.
Yeah.
So it took that clarification to like calm everybody down.
It did.
Which is silly.
Yeah, no, it is silly, but again, I blame that. I put that blame on Sony's for not being clear. I mean, he should have been absolutely been like, the PlayStation 5 is fully backwards compatible with the 4, and 100 of the titles will support this boosted mode. So that's how he should have handled it, in my mind. So, neither here nor there. The other feature I want to talk about, at least features that have been announced, independent necessarily of the raw technical power, is the game suspend multiple, the way that it utilizes the new storage. So the major ways are the multiple game suspends that the Xbox has confirmed, and the like the adaptive installation, the ability to like install parts of a game or jump into a game while the rest of it's installing. These things that the various consoles have confirmed. I forget which one confirmed that feature, but let's break down.
Everything you're saying is Microsoft only.
Oh, is it?
I think so.
Okay. So Sony hasn't confirmed. I thought Sony
really
talked about it in the Wired article where they said this is what the PS5 should be able to do, even if they haven't like announced that yet.
There may have been some like maybe speculative looks. I'm gonna try and look it up a little bit now.
If
Xbox went into that. They like showed it. They showed GUI. They like, here's all these suspended games. We're gonna flip between them all. They talked about how there's virtualization abilities where they could have 4 instances of any Xbox One X game virtualized at the same time because of the hardware increase. And like they showed it off. Sony, again, I'm looking that up. So if you want to talk about any of that stuff while I take a brief look through
and
I synopsis of the Wired articles.
All I was going to add is that Microsoft has confirmed that the multiple suspend feature is a thing, whereas Sony has not yet. So that we suspect it'll probably be the case based on the hardware, but again, they haven't gone out of their way to actually confirm that. And then in contrast, though, I believe, if I'm correct, and you're looking it up so you'll be able to confirm, so I'm just killing time for you to verify it, but I believe that Sony said their ability to, jump into a game while it's installing, that is a feature that the PlayStation will have that Xbox neither confirmed nor denied. So I think that's where the breakdown exists right now.
The fact that I'm having trouble finding verbiage on the suspension of games on PlayStation tells me they haven't really said a whole lot about
Okay,
it.
that's fine. Then we'll leave it at that and just say there's still some question up in the air. And I think in both cases, the fact that Xbox has confirmed some of those details, whereas Sony has not or has been dodgy about it, definitely is a point in Xbox's favor at this
Yep.
point. Because they're basically demonstrating, showcasing aspects of the hardware that should theoretically be possible with the PlayStation. But again, Sony's been silent on that. So those are, again, just features. Ceteris paribus, all things being equal, both consoles should have. But the fact that Microsoft has been upfront about it, I think, is pretty cool.
You are correct. There was in the Wired article, Mark Cerny says, rather than treating games like a big block of data, we're allowing finer grained access to that data. This means that players should be able to choose which parts of the games they want to download, just like the single player campaign or the multiplayer. So that's the speculative stuff. It's like, this means that players should be able to choose which parts, but it's not really confirmed. It's just like speculation based on what Mark Cerny said about how there's a finer grained access to the data. So we don't really know for sure, but theoretically it should be possible.
Should be possible, but again, I think it's a weakness that if they can't get it to work, then that's a problem. If they can get it to work and have got it to work, then why not showcase that? Because that's an important thing. That's something that people will be like, oh, that's awesome. I could do that. That's amazing. I want to buy a PS5 now.
That is the best segue into our next question.
Yeah.
About the vision contrast. Based on the information revealed so far, what are Microsoft and Sony's competing visions look like? What directions are they trying to each move the industry? That's a weird written question, but I read it verbatim. I'm sorry.
That's fine. I wrote it. What I think I was trying to say is, what are they trying to make the next console war about? Like, where do they want to move the industry based on what they've revealed so far?
Yeah. And you talked about how Microsoft has shown you all this stuff and they've communicated clearly with you. Microsoft has also shown in their reveal of Microsoft or of Xbox. Their naming is driving me insane.
I know.
The Xbox Series X, when they showed off the hardware, they said, here is State of Decay 2. That is a current gen, like Gen 3, we're going to say. It's an Xbox One gen game. Here it is running on Series X. You can see it load faster. It runs faster. No pop-in at all. It looks great. Has all these upgrades to it. Backwards compatibility. Boom. We have not seen a single frame of any game running natively on a PlayStation 5 yet.
We have seen bits and pieces of Godfall in the trailer.
Did it say it was rendered on a PS5 or just
I don't know.
developed for a PS5? Because that's developed by Gearbox. That's a third party. It's probably going to come out on all of the stuff.
No, it's just so far it's just PC and PS5, though that you're right, it could be rendered on PC.
Right. So we don't really know what we saw footage-wise, if it was actually on PS5 hardware or not. But the point I'm trying to make is that Microsoft is looking at the gamer first, and their messaging, and this goes all the way back to the beginning of this recording 40-some minutes ago, where we talked about how your perception of what Microsoft has been doing versus Sony's, you have so much more information from Microsoft. And that's because you're a gamer. You're not a software developer. You're not making games. You are a consumer of the games. And that's why we all, me included, I'm a software developer, but I'm not a game developer. We all know, everyone knows more about the Series X because they've marketed all of their messaging to the consumer. And they've been gamer first this entire generation with the backpedaling. The moment they put, what's his name? Phil Spencer at the helm of Xbox, they have been nothing but consumer gamer initiative pushing, friendly upfront, with Game Pass, with getting rid of the Kinect, with all of the freebies, all the subscription models we talked about, how you can go buy an Xbox Series X and finance it, no interest. It's just trying to get as much Xbox into everyone's hands. First-party games being made available on Game Pass, which is their Netflix subscription. All of these moves that Microsoft has done, they're continuing with the Series X. And they're showing you, as a gamer, what the next gen looks like. And they're appealing to you by showing you can suspend 4 games at one time. Here's a real-time view of us doing that and switching between backwards compatible games and new games. Every new game is going to be playable on every generation of Xbox. Well, Xbox One, gosh, Xbox One X and Xbox
Huh.
Series X, which is Gen 3 and 4. Like every new game that comes out for the next 18 months is going to be playable on your PC, on your Gen 3 or your Gen 4 Xbox. It's like, so they've just been super, super gamer focused. Sony, not so much. Sony has been developer focused, which in my mind is so Microsoft focusing on the gamer is kind of like a band-aid. That's the
Yeah.
end result. That's the cover, right? And I understand why they're doing it, because the gamers are the ones that are spending the money on the product. And so you want to appeal to them because you want a wide market. You want to sell your stuff. Sony is at the root of everything, and that's the developers. He introduced his entire talk by saying he has spent the last 4 years traveling between every development studio that makes anything for PlayStation around the world, and he has talked, sat down with, and discussed all of their needs, all of their hurdles, all of their problems, their technical problems, and they've come up with a solution, which is the PlayStation 5, to meet all those needs first. And the reason why you want to be developer friendly is because if you get amazing games out of your developers by making their lives easier, those amazing games are going to draw players, and those amazing games are going to sell. And those players are going to spend money on your ecosystem. So that's the difference in their vision.
Yeah,
What do you
no, and I totally agree with you that, like, if Microsoft can focus to gamers all they want, but I begin to question, like, it's great that people will be able to play all the year one Series X games on their Xbox One X, but at what point does that limit developers? At what point do they say, well, I'm sorry, your game has to run on the One as well as the Series X? At what point is that limiting? Whereas PlayStation's advantage of saying, hey, we're drawing a line in the sand, and here's the specs you have to work with for PS5 games, that means that developers can do so much more. And as we've seen with the last gen war, exclusive games sell consoles. They really do. I can't tell you how many people bought PlayStation 4s for Spider-Man or God of War. If they just, those games sell.
Yep.
So I do think that you're right in that regard. However, at the same time, in contrast, I have to think about, like, Sony still needs to make sure they keep their end users in mind. And if they create a frustrating ecosystem or a unclear, if they're not clear with their people, they could still lose. Some of that gap might be closed by Microsoft. So I do think, I mean, we saw that in the history of things. We saw that happen last gen with the Xbox One, when Microsoft did not pay attention to the needs of the consumers. Because again, Microsoft was making a very developer-focused choice when they said no disk drive, digital only, because developers make more money off of digital copies of games. Everyone stands to benefit more from digital copies of games. That was a very developer-focused, anti-consumer decision. So
Yep.
I do think it's the where Sony can improve is their communication towards the consumer. And I still think they have the advantage where they stand now in trying to revolutionize what games are capable of, because that gives developers more tools and toys to make the best games, which will sell their console. But Sony has some work to do in the way that they interface with their users, their end users.
You bring up the history. I'm gonna go all the way back to Xbox, the original one. And Xbox was actually called that because DirectX, and that was a Microsoft exclusive, like, graphics API that PC developers were using, and they wanted to create a common, like, PC development station to a console and be able to have that kind of ease of compiling and, like, similar architecture. So if you're developing a game for your PC audience, you could also port it over to Xbox original easily. Now, at that time, we had the PlayStation 2, which had the Emotion engine, and then we had the GameCube, which had some custom AMD proprietary thing. So all three had different architectures. And if you wanted to develop a game for all three, which most third-party people do, I'm going to take Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 as an example. If you're Activision and you're Neversoft developing the game, Activision's funding it, Activision has to make a decision. Are we going to pay Neversoft to take the time and the manpower to compile this game, the same assets, the same sound, the same everything, 3 different ways, and do all of its QA and testing across 3 different entire hardware platforms. It was a problem, but Microsoft started it. Like, they started that vision. Now you fast forward to Sony's PlayStation 3 debacle. When they announced the PlayStation 3, you talk about how consumer focused they were. They were so consumer focused, high on the success of PS2, which is the most selling console of all time, the PlayStation 2. They're on a high, they're cocky, they're like, yeah, PlayStation 3 is going to be awesome and people are going to buy it. And here's what it can do. And they showed these tech demos, one of which was a Final Fantasy VII intro scene that looked gorgeous. Another one was Killzone 2, and here's what it can do. And it showed graphics that were way beyond the capabilities of what any developer could possibly do. They put developers in a horrible spot, and they caused Guerrilla Games, which is an internal first-party studio, to go nuts over Killzone 2 because they had a bar to reach that was impossible. And what they did to get what we have is insane. It's amazing. It's a miracle that they could do it, and it is a testament to how amazing Guerrilla Games is, and Horizon Zero Dawn is the most recent product of that studio. So if you want to care more about that story, go look that up. The story of Guerrilla Games making Killzone 2 after Sony raised expectations beyond any acceptable level because of that. So that's the mistake Sony made. They also marketed the PS3 at $600, which is insane.
Yeah.
The antithesis of what they've done today. So with the PS4, they did what Microsoft did back in the original Xbox time, and they said, we're going to move to the x86 architecture, and we're going to be developer focused, and we're going to make developers' lives easy. And Mark Cerny went into this with his revelation of the PS5 stuff last week about how quick any developer can put a game on the PlayStation 5. And he said they reduced it from 5 to 6 months down to 1 to 2 months.
Wow.
So they're making it ridiculously easy to put any game they want on PS5 because of what they're doing at the architecture level and keeping it developer focused and making their lives easier. So costs go down to make the game, and they're continuing. All I'm trying to say is Sony's strategy changed with the failure of PS3's launch. Midway through the PS3 cycle, they made that switch. They came back. They almost outsold the Xbox 360. In fact, they did by a small margin, and they caught up. And then they changed their tactics for PS4, and they're continuing that now with PlayStation 5. Now, Xbox is in the opposite spot, kind of like the complementary. I don't know what the antithesis of complementarianism is, but they're exactly the opposite, right? So with Xbox One, they came out, they didn't listen to consumers at all. They said TV, here's this Kinect, we're going to be a DVR, we're going to sports, Call of Duty. No one wanted it. It was extremely expensive because it was bundled with this Kinect camera that nobody really cared about, and they had to switch focus midway through a generation cycle, and they did. And now we have a Microsoft that is super consumer focused, and we're going to see how these different strategies play out, because now we're starting a new generation with the same tactics. Microsoft just changed. Sony is not changing because their last generation, they did make that switch and they were successful. So it's really going to play out. And this goes into our next question about the console war speculation. How is it going to go down? What are the advantages and disadvantages of each one? I've kind of touched on it a little bit. You make the developers' lives happy, we're going to get amazing experiences and amazing games. And that's just what's going to sell consoles. That's what's going to keep people in your ecosystem.
I agree. I think that there's still information we need, and we'll probably do another bonus episode when both consoles have fully realized their marketing, and we have release dates and price tags. That's going to be, those are the next missing pieces right now, are what are each console going to cost? Because at the end of the day, that's going to make decisions for people. People are going to say, you know what, this one's cheaper. This is the one I can afford, and they're going to buy it. They're not going to care about teraflops. They're not going to care about who, they're not going to care about games. They're just going to be like, I want this box because I want to play this third-party game on it, and it's cheaper. So in contrast, there's going to be a much smaller number of users who are going to say, this one's more expensive, so clearly it's better, for whatever that's worth. And they're going to buy the more expensive one. So price will make a difference. And then release date may make a difference as well. So this one's coming out sooner. I want to jump into the next gen as quickly as possible. So here we go. So those are the two missing pieces, I think, right now that might slightly change how the console war goes down in my mind. That said, with the information we have right now, as you highlighted, it seems like Microsoft is really going after winning the hearts of gamers. And so they're doing things like Xbox Game Pass and Xbox, was it the Ultimate, whatever the subscription-based model they have, where you can pay a monthly lease on an Xbox, and Game Pass and Xbox Live are bundled in. Like, that's super consumer-friendly, and I feel like a lot of those features will mitigate some of the damage that Sony's exclusives will do, if that makes sense. So I think those are attractive options that will attract a lot of players, as opposed to Sony. They're, at the end of the day, they're still banking on making the greatest games and saying the only place to play them is the PlayStation 5. If the past is any indication, that's a strategy that will work out for them in selling boxes. Long term, and that's when we're getting into speculation about the next console war. And I think long term, with cloud gaming and the emphasis that Xbox is putting on it, but Microsoft, I should say, Sony's lack of capacity in that area, I think will hurt them in the long term. But as far as this console generation, I think the games will sell the box.
You brought up two good points. I'm going to touch on both, and that's cost and live streaming, like cloud computing.
Yeah.
So with cost, that's super important. So we know and we speculate that Sony chose to put fewer compute units in the CPU and push the frequency because of cost. They can overclock the crap out of a processor and save costs with good thermals than it would be to put a more expensive chip on the hardware. That's one cost-saving strategy they've already said. Another one was the solid-state hard drive size. It's 825 gigabytes versus a terabyte from Microsoft. So we know they're saving costs there. With Microsoft, we don't see any cost-saving strategies whatsoever. And if you go back to the Xbox One X, it is more expensive than the PS4 Pro, and it is the most powerful console. It goes back to that brute force strategy I was talking about before. Microsoft seems like they want to come out with, we have the most powerful console out there. Games will run and look better on our platform. Caveat, only games that are on both consoles might look better.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a cost thing, and we don't know what Sony's coming out. And if they do come out even $50 cheaper, if Sony comes out $50 cheaper, they win. The next console generation, easy, because of the install base they already have, the foundation of first-party software they've already laid. Like, Sony is going to win. If they are the same price, then we're gonna see a little war happen.
That's why I fully expect whoever announces the price first will set the price, because the other one's going to match, even if it's at cost to them.
Yeah. And then you go into the whole marketing strategy, economy stuff that I don't even, businessy things about like you sell the console at loss, but you get the platform install base, and then you make up the money on the developer end, the publisher end. There's all these monies flying everywhere. It's all about money. All of this is all about money. So, but Xbox has the consumer-friendly Xbox All Access. That's the subscription you were talking about, where for $20 a month for 2 years, they'll send you an Xbox One X. You'll get Game Pass, Xbox Live Gold, which comes with free games. Game Pass has a whole library of over 100 games. You get all their first-party exclusives on day one, and it's $20 a month, which is cheap because cable TV costs $50 a month. Now you're getting a gaming console with all of these games and internet access for all of it for $20 a month. So it's a super consumer-friendly deal. And then we have Game Pass by itself, which is super cheap. And so Microsoft is pushing those things to increase their install base, which they're banking on the long run. Those people who have ingrained themselves in the ecosystem will want to upgrade to newer hardware and buy the Series X. But they're also not putting pressure on them with their backwards compatibility strategy, where every game is going to be playable on all of the Xbox marketed consoles, where we don't know anything about Sony at all with that. Other than, now we're going to go to my second point, which is streaming. And we know PlayStation has PlayStation Now. They bought Gaikai, the company, and rolled them to kind of boost their PS Now, and they've most recently dropped the price of that subscription service down to $10 a month, and it allows you to play all the PlayStation 3 games. For PS2 and PS4 games, you can play those as well, but you can download them to the hard drive and play them natively on the hardware, versus the PS3 games, which are streamed. It's not that great. Like I downloaded it, I did a trial, I played some PlayStation 3 stuff. It works, but it's so variable. It's like it's not consistent. When it works, it's great. When it doesn't work, it's horrible. And with Microsoft, they have the whole Azure server. In fact, Sony there was a rumor or whatever, some discussion that got leaked that Sony is in cahoots with Microsoft and working a deal to leverage their Azure servers. That's what could be a key component in PS5 with any cloud computing stuff they want to do. And that's also developer friendly, because if a developer wants to make a third-party cloud-based solution, they've got Google Stadia, they've got Microsoft, and they've now might have Sony with this new discussion between Sony leveraging Azure servers. So as a developer, you can make a game and possibly reach 3 different platforms to increase that install base, which is that precious number you want to multiply sales. So the streaming wars are upon us, and we don't know what Sony's doing. They're not talking about it.
Yeah. Crazy. Okay, any other thoughts? I don't think I have anything to add to what we've discussed at this point.
There's one last nugget.
Do it.
And that's virtual reality.
Oh, God.
That's always like our forward-facing one, right?
Uh-huh.
So we know Sony has PlayStation VR, but Microsoft straight up said, we are not doing virtual reality.
Yeah.
That is not our focus. That is not our thing. And I wonder if that will move the needle at all. You know, if you're a PSVR user right now, we know the PSVR unit will be compatible with PS5. They've announced that, and it might have some upgrades, you know, and VR titles are graphically demanding. So, you know, all that solid state stuff we talked about, all that strategy could be beneficial in the virtual world, virtual reality stuff, and they just haven't talked about it yet.
Yeah, you have to be able to run a game at 60 frames per second if you're doing it in VR, just because of the way people process.
You have to render it
visually.
twice. You have a left and a right, and you offset them to create the 3D effect. So you're rendering a 1080p or a 4K image 2 times, and that's why it's so taxing.
Mm-hmm. So Sony or the PlayStation 5 being able to do that will give it an advantage over the 4, but will it be able to sustain that? I think the big clincher there will be whether or not Half-Life Alyx is on the PS5, because as of right now,
oh my gosh, dude, if it does,
it will sell consoles, it will sell PS5s, because being able to buy a PS5 for $500 or so, and the PSVR equipment for another $250 or something.
That's what the original PSVR is. If they come out with a new one, it could be $300 or $400.
Either way, it still should be comparable, if not cheaper, than buying a VR capable PC. So that will again, at the end of the day, if we're just talking about selling boxes, it'll sell PS5s, and for Half-Life Alyx alone. So I guess that's partially on how well it reviews, but early impressions of the game are all favorable. So Microsoft might find themselves missing out on a whole lot of money for not, focusing on VR, and essentially losing Half-Life Alyx. Although one could argue they're still selling a lot of Windows boxes with Half-Life Alyx. So
yeah, I mean, Microsoft's kind of had the PC ubiquity forever with Windows, and they have that whole deal. So yeah, I guess Steam is kind of tied to Microsoft in some backdoor way, if you look at it that way.
Yep. People have to buy Windows machines to run Steam well, so yeah.
Yep.
It's
and
not,
so Microsoft
there may not be like backdoor deals, but
that's what I'm
at the end of the day. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're simply saying indirectly related, proportional.
That's a much better word. Indirectly.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, that's it. Well, that puts us pretty much in the same amount of time as a normal episode. We talked a little bit more about our main topic because we subtracted DLC and favorite things, but we're running around, 75 minutes. So I think that's good. I think that does it for us.
Absolutely. Again, this will be unedited, uncut. We apologize for any of the lack of post-production on this show.
Yeah, we'll give it a cursory listen just to make sure things lined up okay, and audio quality is up to our standards. Obviously it's going to be slightly different because we're using crappier mics as opposed to our nice fancy ones with the cool interface we have. So there should be if you notice a dip in audio quality, that should explain it. But so we apologize for that for anybody who's offended by that. But this gives us the advantage of being able to record remotely in these times when it's important to distance.
Hey, for the last hour, I completely forgot about the coronavirus.
Nice.
Thank you.
I hope that we took your mind off it as well.
Hopefully.
So yeah, next, or gosh, I don't know if this will air before. I guess it'll air.
I hope to get it up soon. So the next episode should be the coronavirus episode on Monday.
Yep. Then yeah, that's what you have to look forward to. If you want to know more about what our thoughts are on this current situation, the coronavirus, we break it all down in the next episode. If you already have heard that episode, then the next episode that should be available is our episode on progression system. So that'll be up as well.
Look forward to it.
All right. Well, have a good week, y'all.
See you next week.